My name is Greg Palast. I am an investigative reporter. I do that for BBC television in Britain because, as you know, investigative reporting is illegal in the United States under Patriot Act 3. So I've written this book, Vultures Picnic, in pursuit of petroleum pigs, power pirates, and high finance carnivores, but I have to change the title from Vultures Picnic because I got a call last night from Mitt Romney who asked me to change it to Job Creators Picnic. I'm not quite making that up because my bosses, the network chiefs at BBC, did get a call from Mitt Romney's biggest fundraiser, his sugar daddy, a guy named Paul the Vulture Singer, his office, his biggest funder and his advisor on the economy. And he wanted them to know, BBC, that they, the Mitt Romney guys, have a file on Greg Palast. And they said, we know, we bought the book. There's nothing you can tell us. But what I want to tell them is, see, Mr. Singer, Mr. Romney, I have a file on you. Let's talk, let's open it up, okay? Let's open the file. Let's open the file, okay? And I'll tell you why I want to open the file. Because this is the book of my investigations. An investigation of the 1%. It's a book, and why I'm here tonight is to talk about why we occupy. See, it's not about the real estate. Occupy Wall Street. No one is against Wall Street, okay? It's an address. It's a piece of asphalt, okay? We're not against the place on the Google map. We're concerned about the occupation on Wall Street at the 67th floors and above of the 1% of the movers and shakers that move and shake us. It's not about tents and tarps. It's not about the real estate. We occupy for Stanley Ann Mattingly. He's in the book. See, before I was an investigative reporter, I was an investigator. And one of the investigations I was on was there was some pilfering, some theft of oil at the Osage Indian Reservation in Oklahoma. Stanley Ann Mattingly lived in a trailer, made about $30 a week from her share, the Native Americans' share of the oil wells that were on their property. These little stripper wells, and trucks would come out and suck up the oil, and they'd get on her property with that little horse that nods up and down, and they'd pull out 20 barrels of oil, and they'd write down 16. Then they went to her friend's property and sucked out 42 barrels of oil and wrote down 36. And so on, and so on, and so on. And it added up about $160 million worth of oil. Now, I wasn't alone. The FBI was working on this. There wasn't a question. We knew what they were doing because we were filming it, okay? Follow the trucks back to a loading dock where all the trucks came there in Oklahoma, to the contractor who was allowed to take the oil but supposed to write it down. And there was a guy standing on the loading dock, and he was telling the truckers, I want more overage. Overage is that skim, the difference between what they took and what they said they took. I want more. And the drivers are shaking because they'd lose their job if they didn't get more. Now, the guy in the dock, his name is Charles Koch. Now, I have a question. Why? And the question, Koch answered that question. He didn't know it. But we had one of his top executives wired. And he relates how he asked Koch the question, why? I mean, the guy was, he got his money the old-fashioned way. He was born with it. He inherited it from his daddy. I guess that's his daddy found the John Birch Society, so I guess it was the old-fashioned way. So why? Why does a guy who's already a billionaire want to take $30 a week from Stanley M. Mattingly? A Native American, an Indian living in a trailer. And Koch answered, according to the tape, because I want what's coming to me, and that's all of it. And that is why we occupy. Now, so boom, April 20th of last year, Hitler's birthday, my ex-wife's birthday, Deepwater Horizon blows up. Boom, big column of smoke, and I'm watching these boats spritz the oil fire. And I'm going, this ain't right. You bet it ain't right. I get a cable. Well, Miss Badpenny, that's really her name, my chief investigatrix. That's really her moniker. Badpenny gets a cable from a ship floating in the Caspian Sea off the coast of Azerbaijan. Now, you probably know that its capital is Baku. Actually, you don't know because you don't know these things until the 82nd Airborne arrives there, right? And like Mogadishu, Saigon, Kabul. And the cable says, oh, here it is. I have to black out some of it, of course. You'll see this in the book, by the way, all these documents. I have firsthand knowledge of how they operate day to day. I'm currently blank. Would not be wise for me to communicate via blank IT system. We set up a secure communication. The information from this insider, someone floating in the Caspian, is that when the Deepwater Horizon blew, an accident, BP, the green company, they painted all their gas stations green, It happened before. This was not the first time. Even though, wait, but didn't BP and the other oil company executives testify, sworn, hands raised in front of Congress 6 months before the Deepwater Horizon blew, November 2009, that we've never had problems with these deep water wells? And he's saying a BP Transocean rig, exactly identical, blew out because of for the same reason, cheap, crap cement, process developed by cheap, crap Halliburton, cheap because it's quick set cement, quick, time is money, quick set, except it doesn't work, it blows out sometimes. Now wait, that's a heavy accusation, because if that's true, then the Deepwater Horizon explosion is not an accident, it's a homicide. So, and by the way, when it blew on the Deepwater Horizon, explosion, Jason Alexander, a truly heroic guy. To save everyone's life, he ran to the blowout preventer emergency switch and hit it to stop the blowout. It caused a spark, and he was immediately evaporated. My network said, that's pretty heavy. You can't just report that. You got to find out. So I had to get into Azerbaijan. Not so easy. The Islamic Republic of BP, as I call it. And it's not so easy to get in. A little bit harder to get out. So I go in. I go in with my camera crew, and we have this cockamamie story about why we're there with the camera. Head off across the desert. Didn't end well. Didn't end well for Rommel crossing the desert. Anyway, I'm arrested by the BP police, who bring in the military police, and pretty soon the security ministry is there, which is an honor. The torturer-in-chief shows up. And the first thing they say is, give us your film. Well, they've got guns, we've got cameras, we give them the film. Then they say, give us the chips. See, they've learned that if you take the film, they have computer chips which copy it, so we give them the chips. But of course, so I'm taking notes. They don't take my pen. But before I got on the plane to Baku, Ms. Bad Penny gave me one of those Austin Power jobs with the camera in it, see? So I came out with the film. Now, by the way, if you saw some of those films up there, and if you get the interactive version of the book and you pay a couple bucks extra, you get all these films that are at the top of each chapter to give you the images and the sound, and you get to pay extra money to my publisher for it. So they said, whatever you do, don't give away the films, because it's against our corporate policy. Which means that my publisher's never read my books. So as soon as he said it's against corporate policy, so if you buy the book tonight, go to vulturespicnic.org, go to where it says the films, click on it and say, and a little note will pop up and say, I was here, I got this from WORT, and we will send you a link to every one of those films for free. And we can violate corporate policy together. In fact, and then they said, don't give out any free chapters. Go to vulturespicnic.org, excerpt, you get the whole first chapter, Goldfinger. Now, okay, wait, do I have water here? Now, so I get back from Baku, and I get a message from the Chief of Intelligence of the Free Republic of the Arctic to come up immediately, right now, to emergency, to Koktovik. I don't know, so I look in Google Map, Google Earth or whatever, and there's this little island off the north slope of Alaska above the Arctic Circle. Come up there, so I figure, okay, the next message will come from, one of Santa's elves, obviously written by one member of my staff. Then another message comes from the Chief of Intelligence of the Free Republic of the Arctic saying, where are you? ETOC is waiting. ETOC, so I tell Bad Penny, charter me a plane that can land on the ice. ETOC is a legendary whale hunter and militant chief of the Eskimo. If you meet him, well, you kind of saw him in that film, the guy that was calling me a mother, etc., mother lover, etc. I understand that Eskimos kiss by rubbing noses. I didn't get a nose rub from ETOC. Instead, he brought me up to tell me about this. You see this? Any of you see these cans of Coca-Cola? These little white cans of Coca-Cola? This is the new gimmick. If you go into a store, if any of you drink the sugar bubbles, it's cute. It's a white can. It has 3 little cute polar bears on it, and And if you take the coat off it, go to this special site of Coca-Cola, take the coat off, put in $1, donate $1, they'll match it. They've raised $34,000. So far, the ad campaign has cost $3.5 million. But why? What for? What are you donating for with the 3 little bears? Okay, it's not for Goldilocks. It's for a sanctuary for polar bears. Now I'm looking at this can. I thought, what, sanctuary for polar bears? Polar bears have a sanctuary. It's called the polar cap, right? Excuse me? So what's going on here? Why are they moving the polar bears? ETOC says they're tagging the polar bears so they can move them because they're an endangered species, yeah? He said they told us it was just for a survey of the endangered species, just a population count. But he says they're not counting nothing. They're tagging them to move them to the Coca-Cola Zoo. Why? Underneath those polar bears, and you saw one there that I almost had breakfast with, except he thought I was the breakfast. Oil. Now I said to ETOC, I said, come on, this is not only the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and even Bush couldn't drill in there, but this is offshore, which makes it even more dangerous in the Arctic ice ocean. And he said, they're tagging the bears. And he was trying to explain to me, he knew that Shell Oil, which as in Royal Dutch Shell, would be drilling in BP. That's what he suspected. And he wanted me to take to the Queen, because I'm British Broadcasting Corporation, take to my Queen the message about where he thought would be a better place to stick her oil well. And I said, that's anatomically impossible. But I said, come on. And even my network said, you can't run this stuff that they're not gonna drill there because, well, you know. But then I was concerned about something because the ice is moving away from the shoreline, global warming, see? And so global warming is becoming a profit center as oil-bearing properties are now laid bare. See, the guys who melt the caps understand that there's a profit in melting the caps, right? But this is, so my network wouldn't even run that. They're pretty good, but say, just look, some Eskimo eating whale meat. He takes me inside the whale. If you see there, I'm eating fermented whale meat and congealed blood. Which, by the way, if you ever have a chance to eat some whale meat, don't. Tastes like whale meat and congealed blood. And but he's making a point. ETOC. Whales up there. That's what there is, okay? They don't eat ravioli. Whales don't like to swim in oil any more than people do. And if the whales go, there's no more Eskimo. That's it. He says, we are finished. I said, you have nothing to worry about anyway. So I come back. August 4 of this year, President Obama authorized the drilling of oil at Kaktovik. And that is why we occupy. Now, I almost drank the Coke. How do you cover up an oil spill? I mean, a blowout of a rig. You saw it happen in the Gulf. How do you cover it up in the Caspian Sea? Beatings, bribery. Babes. Lord Brown, CEO, the chairman of British Petroleum, sent down his 727 jet, his private 727 jet, to pick up his area officials for a weekend in London of lap dancing. That's the babes, the beatings. When I spoke to the organizer of the British Petroleum Union, a woman named Mervari. She's letting me use her name. No one else there would let me use their name. She let me use her name. See, because if you saw that picture of that person standing up in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square, well, she stood up in front of a phalanx of officers. I had a picture of that with big batons. Then in her files, I saw the next picture where the 15 police with their batons were beating the shit out of her. Excuse me. They have to beep that out for WORT. And then they arrested her. And then they did it again, beat her and arrested her. And then they did it again, they beat her and arrested her. And I knew that after I left her offices that they would beat her again and arrest her. So did she. She insisted. Okay. That's the beatings. But what about the bribery? Where did that come from? So I figured, okay, how am I going to, I'm told by a guy called the Bag Man that massive bribes, that he himself carried with Lord Brown a bag, 2 bags down to Baku to pay off the president, one with $30 million in a valise, the other, Lady Thatcher. But how do I prove this? So I went to one of BP's partners. I went to a guy who had just received a check from British Petroleum for $90 million. And I knew he was in a bad mood. Because by my calculation, he was owed about $270 million. So he's about $180 million short. I figured he's got in a bad mood about BP. So I go and meet an ex-CIA agent who'd become a demi-billionaire from the information he had from the Cold War, partnered with BP. And he said, Lord Brown bribes. And I said, well, wait a minute. How much? At least $84 million. I said, well, that's a pretty specific figure. He said, yeah, and it was divided up among 7 U.S. oil companies with BP. I said, wait a minute, I can't put that on air, especially in Britain. We don't have a First Amendment in Britain. I don't have any First Amendment protection. I can't just put on your accusation. I have to be able to prove it. And by the way, that's why, by the way, Romney's man, Paul the Vulture Singer, of course, had threatened, because he talked about lawsuit. Because in Britain, I have no protection of the First Amendment. They don't have one there, unlike journalists who are protected here. But I figure I'm campaigning for a First Amendment there, but I figured, they could use ours because we don't use it. So I said, come on. You're accusing these people of a felony crime, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. It's a go to jail, go to prison crime. I can't just report that. What's your proof? What's your proof that they paid an $84 million bribe? He said, well, they sent me the invoice for his share of it, and he gave it to me. They invoiced him for the bribe. And so for Mervari, wherever she is tonight, that's why we occupy now. And we occupy for Chief Emerhildo Criollo. Now, if any of you saw the film on PBS, The Spill, that was PBS's investigation of the Deepwater Horizon spill, right? And we had asked if they would join in our investigation. We're covering 4 continents, and and they said, and Greg Palast will be our reporter. They said, no. So they did their own very, very sharp stuff, a lot of investigation by Google, and then they said the problem, what happened with Deepwater Horizon is that BP does not have a culture of safety. It's a culture issue, like not wearing gloves at the opera or something. Okay, why not? Bad BP. BP bad. Unlike the good safety culture at Chevron Corporation. And they literally on Frontline had the president of Chevron talk about his wonderful safety culture. It wouldn't happen. This type of disaster would not happen if under Chevron's watch. So then my network says, BBC says, we want you to investigate Chevron. I said, what do you mean? PBS just told us that they have a wonderful safety culture. And they said, Well, look on their website. I said, well, what do you say? I don't see anything. He said, go in the Wayback Machine on their website, and you'll see that the official national sponsor of the PBS NewsHour, their official national sponsor is Chevron Corporation. Now, I'm not saying there's a connection. God forbid. But they said you better investigate independently because Chevron's Texaco unit was accused of crapping all over the Amazon. Now, I went down to the Gulf, by the way, because National Petroleum Radio had said that the oil was gone. It was eaten up by miracle bugs. Yum, yum, yum. You know, nature's a happy toilet that will just swallow up anything you give her, any crap, because there's miracle microbes that'll eat all the oil. And a scientist that they had on a program called Science Friday was Dr. Hazen. And he said, bugs ate it. Nature's wonderful. She cleans herself up and blah, blah, blah. Like a cat. Look, there's something. And okay, now of course I did something that the NPR reporters are not allowed to do. Is that I checked the facts and went out to the Gulf to see if there's oil there, and took a boat out, and I was with a professor of biology who told me to jump out. I said, what? Jump out. And I jump into, I'm surrounded by what looks like a bunch of black ponies. Actually, they're big, giant hunks of floating tar 6 months after the spill, 150 miles away, that were cleaned by nature. And I said, how long does this tar slick go? He says 600 miles. Hell, what happened at NPR? Well, they forgot to mention something, which I almost forgot to mention to you. Did you know that Dr. Hazen was given $500 million by BP? Not $500,000, $500 million by BP. Not mentioned by NPR or the money that NPR got from BP. It's amazing what you can see when you look. That's the journalist Yogi Berra. Oh, by the way, not all the oil is on the surface, though. See, that's why it's hidden. And so I was told by this biologist that, in fact, the oil is in the water column. It's not like second grade where it all floats on top, right? And I said, well, how do I prove that? Well, he arranged for a submarine. Try that, NPR. And so anyway, so I went down. So I go down to the Amazon. So the BBC tells you got to go to the Amazon to check out this story. I can't just because the Wall Street Journal had run a story that it was a complete fraud. This oil in the jungle from Texaco that was killing kids with leukemia. And it's a big fraud that some New York lawyers had found some Indians and made up this cockamamie story. And that was repeated by the New York Times, and it was completely ignored by the petroleum broadcast system. So we went down. And I said, how do I get in the middle to like these remote native villages in the rainforest? And they said, well, we'll have a boat waiting for you. So I take a jeep, a couple planes, and then a jeep on the equator there to the end of a trail inside the jungle. By the way, I know if you remember the Sierra Club, it's a rainforest, but actually it's when you're there, it's a jungle. Take my word for it. And the guy says, I was waiting for my boat, Where's the, Humphrey Bogart and the African Queen coming down the Amazon? Instead, he says, Sue Barco, your boat. And it's a dugout log, which you can see in the film. Dugout log with a hand-carved paddle. And then out of nowhere, it's like, this is my boat. I see my hat floating down to Brasilia, this raging river. And it was then I don't know how or who, suddenly out of the jungle comes this indigenous guy who grabs the paddle and off we go, okay? And get to this village, Kofan village, and speak to Chief Criollo, who's a very formal man. He shows up because he's now going to confront Chevron Corporation. He shows up in his war paint, really very serious cat. And I said, okay, come on, Chief, what's the game here? The fraudster. And he said, my son, see, I went swimming here, and I look around. Now, I'd done an investigation of the Exxon Valdez. I was led the racketeering and fraud investigation in that case. I know all about oil slick. And you could see it, you can smell that telltale rainbow sheen on the water. His 2-year-old son went swimming, came up vomiting blood, and died. His older son died much more slowly of leukemia. Now, I had been given a report by some epidemiologists in science that said of the epidemic of childhood leukemias in the oil drilling areas in the Amazon. So I fly to Quito and I meet with the lawyers for Chevron and Exxon. You could also see in the book and meet in the film. And, guy's wearing yellow golf pants. He's got the big bouffant hairdo. And a couple of these guys, and one of them says to me, so, these are the only kids who've ever gotten cancer? I'm not exaggerating the emotions here. I said, well, according to this report, it's from oil poison, oil toxins. I said, and big grin. Well, it may be oil, but you'd have to prove it's our oil. And that's impossible. And he does this grin, I thought his face was going to crack. That's impossible. There's no documents proving it's our oil. I said, yeah, I didn't find documents. But I did find this, see? Now, you'll have this in the book. And by the way, at vulturespicnic.org, you're going to have something called a file cabinet where you can see not just my clips, but the full documents. So I showed him this, which he pretended he'd never seen. And it's signed by R.C. Shields, Presidente de la Junta. That's how the president of the Texaco unit describes himself. And it gives instructions this directly from the president of the company. And it says, blah, 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 in Spanish. You can see it. It says, take all the documents. All the documents must be removed regarding toxins and oil dumping. Must be removed from principal offices and from the countryside encampments. All documents removed. Y ser destruidos. Ser destruidos. I asked him what that meant, and he said, well, it means in Spanish the documents are to be destroyed. And I said, well, I translated it as obstruction of justice, felony, hard time. And I said, is part of the fraud? Is this document authentic? He said, well, yeah, but there's an explanation. I said, there's always an explanation. And he'll get back to me with it. That was 2.5 years ago. I'm sure there's an explanation. It's just taking them a long time to figure out what it is. So, for Chief Criollo and his sons, that's why we occupy. Now, oh, yeah. Now, I get this message. We occupy, I think, I'm not quite sure if I want to, but I think so. We're going to occupy for Jake Horton. Even Jake Horton, though, was a scumbag. Okay. It's all right. Scumbag who he committed a felony crime of making political contributions on behalf of the world's largest power company, Southern Company Corporation. That's when it was before they decriminalized it and before the Supreme Court, like Dr. Frankenstein, allowed corporations to rise and walk. and walk like the rest of us. So now corporations are people. And just like people, they can go to Iraq and have their legs blown off, right? Well, but at the time it was a crime. And Jake, the scumbag, said, I ain't going down myself because this whole corporation is a bag of scum, and I'm going to take the documents with me to the Attorney General. And he borrowed the company plane. 12 minutes after he takes off, Jake and his documents explode all over southern Georgia. Now, it's funny, when we asked the CEO, BBC asked the CEO, the chairman of the board of Southern Company, what happened to Jake. He said, I guess Jake saw no other way out. We did get a call saying you don't have to continue, now that Jake's gone, right after Jake was blown up, you don't have to continue your investigation of Southern Company. See, I was on the actual racketeering investigation. And now, yeah, Jake's documents blew up. But one of them floated down. $117.903 million. This is spare parts for nuclear plant, the Vogtle nuclear plant. What's interesting, these are charges that are charged to the people, to the customers, just like you're charged for parts on your nuclear plants and other parts. The thing is, what's interesting about these parts is that they don't exist. They made them up. Or they kept them in bins and never actually used them. It's fake. It's a fraud. It's a crime. It's racketeering. It's go to jail time. And in fact, a grand jury brought it in front of a grand jury, and they indicted the company. But then there's a little problem called the U.S. Supreme Court, which said, despite corporations being people, and if you're a people and you lie and collect $117.9 million, which isn't yours, you go to jail. But if you are a power company, they said, by definition, you are exempt from the racketeering laws of the United States. So, there you go. But you can't make a political contribution now. So even for Jake, we occupy. Now, of course, I don't know if you know this, but last year in May, the President of the United States put in an emergency funding bill into to the Congress for body armor for our soldiers in Iraq and Iran. And not yet. That's I wasn't supposed to tell you that. Iraq and Afghanistan, and for the armor for their Jeeps. So they need $134 million for body armor, another $300 million for the Jeeps, and then they needed, and so everyone voted for it unanimously. Apparently, they also needed 4 nuclear plants. Huh? Slipped inside the body armor emergency bill was authorization to fund for the U.S. government to guarantee funding for 4 new nuclear plants. And I thought, that's so brilliant. That's just brilliant. I smelled Houston. And sure enough, I mean, literally within days, I get a thick, not this book, but about this thick as this book, Vultures pick, a series of documents that I call the radioactive brick. And I don't know who sent it. That is, the envelope with the return address. I burnt it so fast I just don't remember what the return address was. And but included some handwritten notes. And it says, submitted in confidence, trade secrets, or proprietary. Someone couldn't figure out what the cover story was. Oh, that's the other thing. These guys always keep notes of what they do. I love copying machines. Okay. Email. Now, the company in Houston, there were 4 companies. One of the 4 companies is this company in Houston, which goes under various aliases, Nina, Reliant, Houston Power and Light, NRG, just, unlike people, corporation people can shift shapes, right? So in their latest shape, they got a guarantee to build a nuclear reactor. Now, they got it because all these companies wanted free money from you and me, but they got it because they put down for the Department of Energy, and you can see $5 billion, just simple, not a lot of, $5 billion. And in the weird world of nuclear power, $5 billion is cheap for a nuclear plant. Not, you'd have enough, with $5 billion, you can have enough windmills to blow Texas to back to Mexico where it belongs. But that's $5 billion. That's what they told the government. But see, at the bottom, they're going to build 2 reactors at $5 billion each. Suddenly it says $14.2 billion. Now, 14.2 divided by 2 means 7.1 billion per plant, not 5 billion. Now, the difference between 5, now, by the way, even George Bush could do that math. All he has to do is take off one shoe, and it's like, so wait a minute. I don't know about Texas, but in my neighborhood, the difference between 5 billion and 7 billion is 2 billion. In my neighborhood, 2 billion is real money. In fact, in my old neighborhood, that's a crime. Fraud, racketeering. Oops, I forgot. Nuclear people are not liable to racketeering. I have this. Oh, by the way, I wrote up a story for a paper, a magazine, that I won't mention. It's called Newsweek, or sometimes the Regressive. And they were gonna run it but then they ended up with a much more important story called Lesbians Who Love Gay Male Porn. I'm not kidding you. That's what replaced the story. I set it aside. There's always England and democracy now. Bless you. So I forgot about it, and I put the radioactive brick on the side, and then boom, tsunami, 9/0 earthquake. Fukushima starts melting, or it looks bad shape, and I turn to Bad Penny and say it's going to melt. He says, how do you know it's going to melt? I said, I know it's going to melt. So well, if you're going to know it's going to melt, you got to put it in the book. I said, I can't put it in Vulture's Picnic. It's done. I have a capitalist pig publisher who just wants the book, and it's done, and I'm not writing another chapter. And by 2 o'clock in the morning, after only minimum of violence, it's chapter 10, and Fukushima, Texas. She says, how do you know? I said, look in the files. It's like Raiders of the Lost Ark, those big, long files. We really do have a warehouse filled with files. Go back to my 1988 files, pull out a 1983 notebook. Now, every nuclear engineer keeps a daily log in a little notebook like this. And I had one from a guy named Gordon Dick, who is the chief construction engineer at a nuclear plant. He was chief construction engineer for a company called Stone and Webster. Now, Stone and Webster. Now, Stone and Webster, let's see if I can find this here. We figured out Murder Jake. Yeah. Stone and Webster built a big number of the nuclear plants here and in Japan. And he writes in his notebook, and I'm reading from the handwritten notes, which you can see in the book right there, and you can see yourself at vulturespicnic.org. And it says in the handwritten notes, Wiesel was very upset. Wiesel was in charge of testing for earthquake proofing of nuclear plants. Wiesel was very upset. He seemed very nervous, very agitated. In fact, the plant was riddled with problems that no way on earth could stand an earthquake. Would completely, I'm reading from the handwritten notes, 1983, completely and utterly fail during an earthquake. They knew. So why didn't they fix it? In fact, the reason Liesel was agitated was not because someone might die and Japanese might fry. He was concerned that he had violated the law and he was going to go to prison. It's pretty clear what the law is, that he had to state. He had actually done the testing and put down that the company, that these nuclear plants had failed the earthquake proofing test, and they made him change it. Okay? Now, I happen to have gotten the report that said that the test passed, and I got the report that said it failed. Now, I put that in front of a jury, federal jury. And the federal jury, in federal court, found Stone & Webster, this company, part of a conspiracy to defraud the public, commit racketeering, and the jury found their co-conspirators liable for $4 billion, and Stone & Webster went out of business. Okay, now, good story. Another nuclear plant. I want you to enjoy this moment, but only for a moment, because there's another report. Oh, by the way, why did the diesel generators fail? I mean, even if the plant shook apart and all the crap fell off the walls and it started melting and the water releasing, it should have pumped up with water and stayed cool. Why did it melt down? Why is it going to cause 10,000 to die of cancer? Why? Because the emergency diesel generators failed. Well, wait a minute. They're big. They're gigantic. They're bigger than this. They're like twice the size of this stage. They're big and they make a lot of noise. Okay? And let's see what they are. Is they're old engines from cruise ships. And have you ever seen a cruise ship take off from a dock? I've never seen one go at 170 knots right from jump, which is what they'd have to do in an emergency. No time to warm up the bearings, or if any of you know engines or generators, right? And what happens, for those who know, they crack. The emergency diesel generators of Fukushima. Oh, the cover story. I heard, oh yeah, Anderson Cooper said, oh my gosh, they were covered with, there was a 9/0 earthquake. It was too big. We didn't expect that. There was no 9/0 earthquake. That's in the middle of the ocean. By the time it hit Fukushima, it was 5% of that power. What happened to the wave? Take a look at the Google map, man. The generators are way behind where the water went. They weren't drowned. Some of them got wet. Duh. Put your cell phone in your bathtub, it doesn't work too well. They didn't think of that. Some of them got wet, but most of them failed because they were turned on. They committed suicide. Okay, they can't go in 12 seconds at 20,000 RPM. They just crack. And once again, a notebook from another engineer, R.D. Jacobs. See if I have his notes here. Yeah, that's a blow-up of his notes. You'll see that. R.D. Jacobs say, by nature, they are not designed to withstand emergency stress. Okay, they knew. They might as well, you know what it is? It's for your benefit, so you'll feel better about the nuclear plants. And they could have put, Christmas tinsel and a couple Hanukkah bushes out. It would have been just as effective in cooling those plants down. Sleep tight. Now, but remember, I put that in front of the jury too. That was one of what they call predicate acts. This was, and by the way, until the Supreme Court, by the way, reversed that judgment and said, no, they're corporation people, not people, so they're not liable racketeering. But that's not what I'm concerned about, because Stone & Webster still went out of business. But they shifted shape. Okay. Now, if you get caught driving drunk a couple times, the last thing you're going to get is a license to drive a school bus. But if you're a corporation people, you can change your name, as they did, and became the nuclear unit of Shaw Construction. And Shaw Construction has been given the contract to build all 4 new nuclear plants in the United States, which will keep them busy, because since they've been given the contract to rebuild Fukushima, same guys, okay? And that's why we occupy. Now, all right. Oh, yeah. We occupy for Janessa Gregg, 13 years old. After I go down from Eat Talk, there's all these pipes breaking. You know, Yellowstone Park, remember, big oil spill, Trans-Alaska Pipeline, spills you never even heard of. What the hell is going on, right? So I get a message from a guy I can only call Pigman 1. Okay, now, they're telling you that they're going to build a pipeline from Canada down to Houston. Now, why they're taking oil down to Houston, that's another investigation for the next book. But why are they? They're going to slice America in half over our aquifers with this pipeline. It's safe. Look at our regulations. Look at the equipment we have to keep this stuff safe. And yeah, there's some truth in that because they have this incredible National Petroleum Radio had this story on something called a smart pig. There's a pig in every pipeline, and it's a big robot that you stick in the, by law, every pipeline has to have several of these, which you stick in the pipe, and it has little whiskers, little wire whiskers, and it has sensors and stuff in it, and it goes through the pipe, the oil or the gas, and measures pressure, and is there cracks or corrosion. It's got to, you know, and anytime it squeals, you have to dig up the pipe or remove the pipe, replace the pipe. It's really expensive. Even to run the thing costs sometimes $1 million a barrel. So the cheapest thing to do is to silence the pig. Why were there all these cracks? Why were there all these breaks? What's going on? What happened to the pig? Well, NPR said it was, well, sometimes they just don't work. What do you mean? Now, BBC, we don't go through the same process of lobotomy that they do at PBS. But so we say, maybe it's not. Sometimes it doesn't miss. These are very smart pigs, these robots, right? Very smart. And sure enough, Pigman 1, and then 2, and Pigman 3 tell me that the pig has been silenced by the software. That what they said was that the software was kind of dialed down so it would rarely squeal, because every time it squeals, there's millions and millions, and it adds up to billions and billions. So the cheapest thing to do is simply stop the pig from squealing. It's kind of like taking the battery out of your smoke detector in your kid's room, which is okay until there's a fire in your kid's room, right? So same thing, except there's a difference. It's against the law. The regulations are very specific about when that pig must squeal. And they violated it, and they said that this team of people had fixed, which is the contractor for all the big oil companies, does the software for the pig. But they said it so it wouldn't be sensitive enough to meet the federal regulations. And they thought it was a dispute. They had to fire one of the guys quit, and they had an argument over it. But I said, would you go on camera? No. Would you go on camera if it put you in shadow? No. Would you? Nothing. But they wanted me to know. Then, last year, San Bruno, California, gas pipe blows up. And Janessa Gregg, 13 years old, her mom, and 8 others just get incinerated. And then Pigman 1 came to me and said, Pigman 2 ran, because suddenly it's not an accident, it's a homicide, and he didn't want anything to do with it. And Pigman 1 said, I saw the pictures. I knew the pig was run through or should have been, and I can't sleep now. Let's talk. And you'll see him, that was the guy in shadow. Okay. And by the way, we give all this information to British Petroleum, Chevron, etc. Under British law, I have to. It's also good journalism. And I say, tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't pay the bribe. Tell me that the Deepwater Horizon was really the first blowout. Tell me that there's not crap all over the jungle killing Chief Kuro's kids. No. It's either silence or what we got back from BP was we followed the regulations, whatever that means. Deniability, right? But never, we didn't do it. It's not true. It's false. It's a fabrication. It's made up. It's wrong. Okay. So for Janessa, that's why we occupy now. Why did Romney's billionaire have his goon call my network with the smear? And by the way, see, they have the file. Okay, I'm showing you the file. Did you see up there in the film when I was doing the nuclear investigation, where I was in? I was doing the investigation of the U.S. power company. See, and I needed information from inside the British government, and one of Blair's rising political stars, a very pretty young woman. I needed information from her. I thought it'd be easier to get it naked. Which was working out quite well until her husband came in. It still wasn't, it was, that's an old story. But the problem was that behind him were the cameramen from and the reporter from the Daily Mirror, and which was at the time edited by a man in Britain known as Puss Moron, but here he's called Piers Morgan by CNN, and who'd set up then made up this cockamamie story about me breaking into the room, or whatever. So if you want to read their file, I've got it, and just read the book, okay? Because what I want to do is take away the bullet out of their gun that they love to use, which is the smear. See, because I want you can have all the smear on me you want. That's fine. But what they can't explain, is the document. And I want you to read the documents. So you get all the fun and games of the smear and how I get all this stuff, or how I failed to get the stuff, but you get the documents, you get the facts. All right, now, so why are they calling about the file? What is it that they don't want me to report? The first chapter is called Goldfinger, and of course the book's Vulture's Picnic, and the number one vulture on the planet is Paul Singer, Romney's advisor and money guy. Now, I didn't give him the name Vulture. I didn't give his buddies the name Vultures. It's given to them by their bankers in admiration. Remember, they live in the 1% live in a different world than we do, okay? With admiration, because what do? How does this job creator make his billions? Where are the jobs? Well, what he does is, Paul the Vulture Singer has found debt securities like an international repo man. These guys are like international repo men. They find old debts of the poorest nations in the world. And when they're in the middle of civil war and mayhem, there's no government, they go into courts and they sue to collect everything that the country has or will ever have. And they take a country hostage and they choke it. These vultures who are feasting on the carcass of this planet's economy, that the picnic's over, okay? Feast is done, picnic's over. And I agree with Charles Koch. Rare, but I do agree with him that I agree that he should get everything that's coming to him. You may be too big to fail, my friend, but not too big to jail. Thank you so much. WORT, The Progressive. Thank you very much for having me here, Madison, Wisconsin. Thank you. Thank you. I'll sign your books. I'll answer your questions. And thank you so much.